What is sure is that the person that are holding actually the process and the evolution of the Tunisian political events are trying to get a situation through which we could have elections and we could have the determination of a new government that would be an emanation of the Tunisian public opinion. But apart from that, it is really very difficult to say how things will evolve. Will we have any stabilization, or on the contrary, will we get through much more troubles, if not to say much more chaos, etc. So time will tell. That going through a unity government in Tunisia would be the best option. But in the same time, what we have seen in the few past days is that all the trends that are present on the Tunisian political scene don't agree the ones with the other. And we could say that a huge part of the Tunisian new political actors disagree with the presence, with an additional presence of the party, of the dominating party, which is Ben Ali's former party. So that's why I think that whatever government, whatever unity government you could have in the future, if it becomes a government that is dominated by Ben Ali's former party, that will create much more trouble, because a lot of parties and a lot of movements won't agree with remaining in the same situation that prevailed till last week. Well, what we can see is that the European Union during the past years didn't really get an attitude, or didn't endorse an attitude of criticizing the Tunisian regime or the Tunisian former president, but from now on, they are trying to insist on the necessary democratization of Tunisia and on their willing of accompanying this same process of democratization. The European Union shouldn't make any direct intervention in the Tunisian affairs. I think that if their rhetoric insists on democratization, that could be a good thing. We couldn't criticize the European Union for being attached to human rights and being attached to democratization. But on the other hand, I think that if the European Union wants to help, it should help maybe only by promising to accompany the Tunisians in the future, specifically from an economic point of view. But according to the political process, I think that the Tunisians themselves wouldn't admit any strong presence of the Europeans in their country. Well, France is being criticized for its position, because till last week it was still defending Ben Ali's regime and saying that what was important was the stabilization of Tunisia. And what we can see is that now that Ben Ali has fallen, they are trying to get through another attitude and to declare themselves ready to help the Tunisian, to help stabilize their country, and also to consolidate their own process of democratization. According to me, that is something, that is a speech that we could compare to the European speech, which is a circumstantial speech. I mean, when the Europeans and the French had an interest into composing with Ben Ali, they did it. Now that they see that we have gone through something else, they try to adapt to the context. We have a common idea in the Western societies and in the Western governments, which consists in saying that lots of the authoritative regimes that are present in the Middle East could be a good thing, because they could be a rampart to the rising of Islamist movements. But what I think is that the Tunisian example has proved that this same idea has shattered today. Why? Because when we look at the future of Tunisia, what we can see is that Ben Ali hasn't impeded any possibility for Islamic movements to reinforce themselves. And more than that, now that Ben Ali has gone, we could see the Islamist movements try to rise and try to consolidate their position on the Tunisian scene by telling, or by going back to all what deals with democratic principles, which means that as the Islamist movements want to exist and as they have a legitimacy, nobody could tell them you can't enter the democratic process. In countries such as Egypt, such as Morocco, even such as Algeria, what we can see is that the actual governments have a very heavy hand in the relations with the Islamist parties, and that's why we can see no political rise of these Islamic parties. But let's suppose that each of these governments or each of these regimes had to collapse in the following days. Of course, what would have been proven is that, as in the Tunisian case, these governments could have succeeded into limiting the impact of the Islamist and the rising of the Islamist movements, but that doesn't mean at all that they have succeeded into annihilating them. Well, I think that we should be cautious when we try to consider that the Tunisian model could generate some similar examples in the region. Why? Because when you look at the situation that prevailed in Tunisia, it is right that a revolt has turned into a revolution, and this revolution has put a pressure on the government, and that's the situation that led or that made Ben Ali quit the territory. That's right. But on the other hand, we shouldn't forget that Ben Ali went off his country because he has been unleashed by the army, and because the army itself wanted him to get off the power. So that's a very important fact. Why? Because it tells us that in other countries in the region, including Morocco, Algeria, Egypt, or even Jordan, a revolt could shed some light on the situation that is prevailing in the country. But more than that, you need the game or the role of other actors in order to get rid of the government that is present. That is why I wouldn't say that the Tunisian model could really generate similar examples in the region in the near future. But from the other hand, let's consider that Tunisia will be able to achieve a transparent, clear and democratic process in the future. In this case, we could see regional public opinions being more and more encouraged to create or to generate the same model in their own country.